Okay, so just to be clear, this is the kind of last video. It's located on the tutorial video doc. It's on YouTube, so they should all kind of look like this at the start when I kind of start getting into it and then run through it. So for today, the first thing that we're going to touch on is exporting out of After Effects, just because this is an important thing to um, get right, so that you're not A, taking up tons of space on your computer, and B, speeding up upload times, because that's usually the limiting factor, or one of the, certainly the more difficult things. If you're working from a home internet connection, your upload speeds, depending on your internet service provider, will be anywhere from 1 megabyte to, even if it's a good one, 6 megabytes, unless you have that sweet fiber, and then you can get up to 100 meg, which is nice. But not all of us have that in our lives. So to get going, so say this is my animation that I'm super happy with, and I want to export it. So the main thing to keep an eye on is which composition is selected down here in your layers palette. So you can have, as you've been working, hopefully you've been pre-comping things as a way to organize stuff. But as you've created these extra compositions, you can see that multiple ones are going to show up down here on your little title bar. And you can switch between them easily just by selecting them. And so when you're ready to export, you want to make sure that you're selected on the composition that you actually want to export. In general, as a workflow thing, I usually at the beginning make a composition called main comp, and that's always the one that I want to export. So any other compositions just live inside of main comp. So at the end, that's the only one that I'm going to export. I'm not going to be hunting and pecking for, map or characters or things like that. I just look for main comp, make sure that it's selected here, and then I come up here to composition at the top and say add to Adobe Media Render Queue. So by selecting this option, what you're going to do is automatically link it over here to this program. So this comes with the Creative Cloud by default. It's called Adobe Media Encoder. I went ahead and opened it up ahead of time just because it takes a second to actually open up. So in the hope that it will be a little bit quicker, if I select that option, it then kind of opens up a kind of a digital link. I don't know totally what's going on. My suspicion is that it connects using some kind of node or server node or a temporary file, whatever it is. Now what shows up over here is going to be the thing that ends up getting exported. And the export options that I would recommend for pretty much all movie files is H.264. This is a good compression, and it maintains pretty good visual quality. If you want a uncompressed, so I selected the middle option, and that's why this thing popped up. What's going to happen in a second is it's going to give me the options that will allow me to customize my export. So this by default, for me, is the one that automatically pops up. I think once you set it, it'll stay that way until you change it. But if you didn't want a compressed file type, you could either use QuickTime or AVI, I believe, is another uncompressed file type. And why it's uncompressed is because it basically exports a ton of completed JPEGs or PNGs or just whatever all in a row. So you can think of an uncompressed movie file as whatever your frame rate is, 24 frames a second. It creates 24 images every second at whatever resolution. So this is a high definition resolution. This is 1920 by 1080. So each one of those images would be like 3 or 4 megabytes. So you could imagine if you have a 60-second animation, 60 times 24 times 3, it adds up real quick. So even with a tiny little animation, it's going to be like a gig or whatever. So this is fine. If you want to do that, that's fine as a source file. I guess maybe that would be nice to have somewhere if you have unlimited storage. Otherwise, I would recommend using a compressed file type or a compressed codec. So H.264 is the one that I recommend. And then the option right below it, which says preset, I would just pick between the three that are there. There's high bit rate, so that means it's kind of the highest quality version of H.264. You'll generally, if you're working with like a, let's see, so this animation is going to be like 30 seconds. This will probably be like 200 megabytes for a 30-second thing. It's not that bad. Medium would probably quarter that or half it. And then I guess where's the low bit rate? Maybe there's not. Well, there it goes, adaptive low bit rate. And so that would kind of be even more compression. Each one of those that you go down is obviously going to be a little bit of a drop in visual quality. Medium bit rate, in my opinion, is kind of the best of both worlds. You get a pretty good looking movie, but you also get a really high degree of compression. So in the end, your file is easily uploaded to YouTube or easily stored in Google Drive, and it doesn't take up tons and tons of space. So these are the two options if you wanted to just not think about it. Just make sure that both of those are selected and you should be fine. If you wanted to do some super customization for whatever reason, you can come down here to these different tabs and start to customize things under video. This is going to be where you can easily change the size of something. So if you didn't want to adjust the size of your animation file, you could actually uncheck this and make your movie smaller here. So you could make it just a smaller version of HD in the export settings, and that way you wouldn't actually have to change the size of your animation file, which would be nice. Okay, so once you have all those in place, the last thing is to just make sure that you are finding an easy place or you're picking an easy place to export, and give it maybe a unique name before you export it. Other than main comp, by default, it gives it whatever your composition name is. So this would be like animation test. I'm just exporting it to my desktop, hit save, and then once you hit play, you'll see it down here rendering away, and then you're done. And so what you end up with is a good version. Oh, where are you? It's always hiding on my desktop. I have too many files. Boom. Bring up my Explorer desktop. So animation test. Oh, maybe I didn't save it to desktop. Where are you? Blink. There it is. Oh, it's in test project. Okay, so it just saved it into the file. So you end up with your MP4, and if you take a look at the size, it's really small. It's only 380 kilobytes because all it is this couple second animation, slides in, slides out. So I will pause here and ask if there are any questions about exporting a movie using the media queue versus just exporting out of After Effects. Okay, in that case, jump on to the other little demo, which is another effect that somebody had mentioned wanting kind of a 90s aesthetic. And so having kind of this tracking glitch look to whatever is just using a couple different effects and then kind of using some layers and something that I haven't talked about yet, which is an adjustment layer. And so we'll run through how to create something like this, which is basically kind of a little bit of a distortion that changes over time, and then turning it off and on using keyframes. So to get started, whatever you're going to be distorting, I'll go ahead and just type out some placeholder text like that. And so this, say I wanted it to look like it's being distorted. The first thing that I'll do is go ahead and, even though there's only one thing here, I usually like to make sure that I'm working at the composition level instead of at the layer level. So the first thing I'll do is make sure that everything that I want to distort is inside of a composition. So at this time, there's only one layer, but even with only one layer selected, I go ahead and say pre-compose, and then make sure to move all the attributes and stuff into the composition. Give it a name. Now it changes the color of the layer, so this is the composition color. The next step that I would do is go ahead and add in, hold on, let me get my, add in a solid color. So I want to just right click down below, go to new, solid, and make sure it's the size of the entire comp, because it's just going to be a solid color. I'm going to make it black, and you can click this button here to just say make comp size, and it'll resize the solid to whatever your current composition settings are. Once you do that, it looks like it includes everything. I'll just move it. Actually, I'll move the text layer up. So it's above my text layer. Then what I want to do is add a effect to this solid color, which is a fractal noise. So underneath of effect, I come over here to, let's see, distort, and then display. No, that's the next effect. Sorry. Make sure this is selected. Go to effect. Now I'll just type it in here. Noise, fractal noise. Go ahead and click and drag it on top of the layer. And then change a few settings in here to get the effect that we want. The first thing that we want to make sure to dial or to change is here under fractal noise, switch it to max, and then switch the noise type to block. And so that gets you the nice sharp kind of pixely type look. And then the next thing we want to do is stretch those out so that they are able to cover the entire width of the screen. So underneath of transform, what I want to do is uncheck the uniform scaling and then scale this width way, way, way up. So it's usually something like, let's see what I usually end up with, like 5,000. So it's really far across. Then I also want to make it so that there's only a few lines on screen at the same time. To make that happen, I'll go ahead and dial the contrast way up and then dial the brightness way down. So you end up with just a couple lines on screen. Maybe a little more and a little more. There we go. And then I'll dial the height of the lines down so that they're a little thinner. Maybe about right there. Dial this brightness down just a little bit more. Okay, cool. So that's looking pretty good. So at this point, the thing that actually receives some animation is under evolution options. It's this random seed. So you can see as I scroll this seed, it changes where like the pixels or where the fractal noise is happening. So you can imagine if I started with a seed of 0 here on my timeline and went ahead and added a keyframe and then came 4 seconds down the timeline and changed the random seed to some other number like 20. As this plays back, you can see that it's just basically creating new lines each time the seed changes. So if you wanted the lines to happen faster, you would make that difference more. So right now, I have my end keyframe set to 20. So if I wanted that to like really start to flicker a whole bunch, I could set my random seed to something like 100. So then it does a lot of changes of the random seed over that time instead of just 20. Cool. So now that I have kind of this flickering behavior, I want to link it to my text in using an adjustment layer. First, I'm going to go ahead and turn this into its own composition by right-clicking on it, saying pre-compose, and say noise. And then above noise, I want to go ahead and make an adjustment layer. So if I right-click down here or go to layer, say new adjustment layer. Right now it's just empty, it's not doing anything, but what you can basically do is add effects to that adjustment layer and it would apply to everything below it. So you can imagine if I had multiple copies of my, different bits of text and I wanted this effect to affect all of them, then this adjustment layer would actually affect everything below it. So if this were duplicated and moved over to the side, because both of these layers are below the adjustment layer, these will both be affected by the distortion that's about to happen. But I'm going to leave that as just a single layer for now, so it's a little bit more straightforward. Because I don't need to actually see the noise, I just need to get the information from the noise. I can turn it off and then add the next effect to the adjustment layer, which is distort. Or let's see, is that not correct? It is effect, distort, and then displacement map. Sorry, it's displacement map, not distort. Distort is the category. So now that I have that on there, and I turn it on, you can see when I turn it off and on, it kind of shifts the text a little bit. And what it's doing is you can move it off to the side or up and down based on some value. So the thing that I actually want to use for the value is here under displacement map layer. I want to pick the source as the noise composition. So if I select that, now you can see that it's shifted the whole text either to the right or to the left or up or down. And then if you adjust the thing to, instead of source, to say mask and effects, now it's only going to do it to the part of the effect that's already on here. So the fractal noise is going to be the only thing that's distorted. And you can dial up the distortion to actually see it really start to take effect. So now you can see that distortion is running over top of that text and moving parts of it, but leaving other parts of it untouched. So it's like a little bit of a flicker. And so what you can do to have that effect like come in and come out as though it's like an old school VHS player and the tracking is adjusting or something like that, you can keyframe this horizontal max displacement and the vertical max displacement to, so if this is, I'm liking how far out of whack that's going, what I could do is go ahead and key that, and then come down here to my layer and hit U. That'll reveal all the keyframes. This is when it is distorting. So what I would want to do is come one frame before and turn both of those back down to 0. So now it won't be doing any effect. So it's chugging along, doing fine, and then all of a sudden it starts to distort. And then you could keyframe it again, move forward one frame, and turn it off. So you can imagine this section is where it's being affected, and then the section before it's not, and then the section after it's not. So it kind of flickers in and out. And you could easily copy and paste those frames, and then adjust the timing so that there's kind of a longer section and then just a quick little flicker. Like that. Okay, so that's basically this in a nutshell. But what it's illustrating is the use of this new thing, which is an adjustment layer, which can be applied to multiple text at the same time. So if I had 2 text layers, they were like that, you can see they're both being affected at the same time. Cool. So I'll go ahead and pause. I know that's a lot of info all at once, but it's been captured forever for viewing later on the internets and YouTubes. So you can refer back to it and use it if you think it might be a technique that you want to take advantage of for your piece.
If I had a question. So if like you were wanting to do like your own kind of like hand painted kind of like texture, or I guess just like kind of like distorted kind of image, like where you went in, there was already that effect in After Effects. But if you wanted to make your own, and then have that like overlaid, that wouldn't be the same, right? It would be something more like doing like a mask over kind of like what you're trying to do if it's like over a typeface or something. Does that make sense?
Kind of. So do you
It's kind of like what you just did, but like not getting something directly from After Effects, but like getting like making something on your own, like scanning like an ink like splatter, or like I don't know, just getting like texture that you could like overlay.
uh-huh,
Um,
uh-huh, uh-huh.
or it
Yeah,
doesn't.
no. I think I understand what you're saying. So
Okay.
maybe if it was like a watercolor bleed or
Yeah.
something like that, where
Yeah.
it's like growing or like a bloom or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, the trick is there needs to be some way of, so the reason this works is because it's generating random noise based on some math operation. So if you wanted to animate this texture, you wanted this texture that you're thinking about to appear not all at once, that's going to be the trick. It's like, how do you get it to appear on screen or interact with the things below it in a way that you have some control over?
Yeah.
So
I guess what I'm saying is like if you say like we did like our own animation like in Photoshop or whatever
mhm,
based off of let's just go with the watercolor one.
mhm,
And you already have like you only need it for 6 seconds, and you do a 6 second animation, and then you want that masked within like text.
mhm.
Does that make sense? Like if it like it not the whole image, but just like within like certain text.
Yeah, I mean, you could just make the text the mask.
Okay, cool.
Um, yeah, that's pretty straightforward. And then depending on how intricate you get with it, like, do you want that interaction to actually feel like it's inside the letters? Then that's
Yeah.
going to be an additional like step that you would have to take into account. That would be more tricky. If you
Where
just
the,
wanted it to like show, like, for example, something that got a bunch of use. Let's see, is it
I'm
true?
sorry, you could always do this like when like we talk individually too, if you like had more stuff you were kind of on a train about.
No,
Uh,
no. That was basically the end of my demo. So to your,
I could also just show you if you want like what
yeah,
I'm talking
go
about
for
like
it.
in my project, because like that's where like I'm at right now, because like
Uh-huh.
um
Please.
and sorry, I didn't mean to like hijack the
Not at all. Actually, that's the funny thing. I've been talking with students and like grad students about like how to make this more like class, because I feel like this type of interaction would be very natural for class. Somebody asks a question and you answer it because you're in person. But it seems like everybody's a little more reserved with um, here, because it's like you don't want to talk over somebody, or you don't want to take advantage of the space. But please speak up. often, but just be respectful, I guess.
Cool. Is it cool if I share my screen?
Mhm.
Also, you're still recording, so I don't know if you want to do that still.
My thinking is that it might be related to
Cool.
what we're doing. So.
Okay. So I just like what I have like on the characters right now is like kind of what I'm talking about, but I want to do it with the text. So the text is kind of just like a placeholder right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like right there, like at the bottom where it's like, um, it's just like the stroke is like the outside of it. Like I don't want it to be the stroke. Like I want like kind of like a texture to be that instead of like there being an outline around the text, if that makes sense.
So there's
Like the texture is like all like masked within this.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um,
And
but like
I
this,
guess
oh, I'm sorry.
no, just the edge. So yeah, you have this kind of like feathered edge. It's not a clean edge. Would you want it to ever be cut off cleanly? Or is it always that it almost kind of looks like somebody did a coloring book and they
Yeah, kind of like
used
a
that.
coloring book. Because like, do you see how like I have the characters right now, or it's just um, like that? Kind of how it's just like it's
Mm-hmm,
not perfect, but it's like within it, and
mm-hmm,
it's still gonna reveal like what the letter is. It's just not gonna be perfect, like
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
sort of thing. That's just where I'm at right now, because like I think that'll be a big visual part of mine as well.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, I think, yeah, the only things that are coming to mind would be a little bit tricky, and they would be, well, it's not tricky, it would be kind of labor intensive. So I could imagine a version of it where you have several copies of your text and you have filled it in with a solid color, and then you've applied a stroke to it as well. And the stroke could be the thing that makes the kind of appearance of animation. Because what you could do on the stroke is give the stroke a texture, and that texture you could author using something. And then what you would do is have multiple copies of it, and each of the strokes would be a kind of a different version of that textured thing. And you would hide and show the different layers in that kind of chunky animated style so that
yeah.
it kind of looks like that stroke is moving a little bit, or what actually it ends up looking like is the fill is moving, but it's really not. It's staying still. And the trick being that the stroke would have to exactly match the background color. So it kind of looks like it's like the inside looks like it's dancing because the stroke is animating over top of this solid fill color. Okay,
Okay.
that might be one way of doing it.
And you can mask like an animate like a imported like video. You can mask over that, or does it have to be something? I don't know if I'm saying that right, but like if you were to like take something from another program like Photoshop
Uh-huh.
and then brought that in and it's a video file,
Oh yeah,
and you can
yeah,
mask over that just fine.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. You, yep.
Okay, I think I know how to do it. I just wanted to like I guess I just needed to like say it out loud and see if it made sense. So
Cool.
thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. No problem. All right. With that, did others have questions on how they might get a variation or some other type of stuff? Going once, going twice. Okay, cool.